Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Wildcard MTG Top 5 Underrated and Budget EDH cards from a set in Magic's history. First off, I want to apologize for the lateness of this video. I had actually recorded about like 3 or 4 of these and a deck tech, and I don't know what happened, but the entire audio was gone for everything. So I wasted about 4 hours of time, could not figure out how to fix it. The weird thing is, I also do a heavy metal podcast, and I've been doing that for a long time, and I've had no issues with any of my interviews that I've done over the past few weeks. But for whatever reason, these files got corrupted and they were gone, and I lost all the audio and lost all that time. Spent a week trying to fix it, and here I am re recording everything again. So, this is the second time y'all are going to be hearing this by the time I'm recording it. So that's why it's been a couple weeks with no videos. Just haven't had time, and with holidays and everything. So this is probably going to be the last video of the year. Going into 2025, I will have a deck tech for my own version of the 20 ways to win deck that I've actually built a long time ago. And for this video, we are going to be looking at 5 cards from Homelands. Yes, Homelands, Homelands, Homelands. Another set that is not very good slash low powered, but does have some kind of cool cards in it. So let's start with Prophecy. It is a 1 white mana sorcery. It says reveal the top card of target opponent's library to all players. If it's a land, gain 1 life. That opponent then shuffles his or her library, draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Now, the reason I think this card is a little bit underrated, if you are playing in a group where you have somebody who tutors for a lot of things, or maybe you've been able to bounce something to the top of their deck on purpose, the shuffle effect will then get rid of that card. It's kind of like a chaos warp in that respect. I know it's very situational, but you also get to draw a card. If you're looking to just draw a card for 1 mana, why not use this, especially in mono white? I know there's better things and secret rendezvous and all that stuff, but as far as just a little 1 mana card, you can't go wrong here, and you gain a life as well. So that's if it's a land, but still, underrated card, I think, and that is the first pick from Homelands. Now, the next card I have here is a 2 generic 1 white card. It is Truce. It's an instant, and it says each player may draw up to 2 cards. For each card less than 2 any player draws, that player gains 2 life. So it's either draw 2 cards or draw a card and gain 2 life. And it's a little bit group huggy, but it is a good way to kind of play politically with the table. It's like, hey, do y'all want to draw some cards? Can you just like leave me alone for a little bit? Whatever you have to do to kind of finagle your way into like making that deal with the table of like, hey, y'all can draw 2 cards or you can draw a card, gain 2 life. Something to that effect. This card has been reprinted, but this is the first set that it was in, so I figured I would showcase it here. And it's at instant speed too, so you can kind of use it in appropriate places where you think a deal might be warranted for this kind of effect. Now, the next card we have here is kind of a weird card. It could be a commander. It's Reveka Wizard Savant. It's 2 generic, 2 blue. Summon Legend. And it says tap, Reveka deals 2 damage to target creature or player and does not untap during your next untap phase. It's a 0/1. Now, I find this card really interesting in that if you were to play a bunch of like untap shenanigans kind of deck, this commander would be perfect for that, or even in it. I know it's a 0/1. But it's the fact that it does 2 damage, which is kind of rare for blue to do damage to anything. It does happen. There's some cards that there's a trade-off for the damage. But the other interesting thing about this card is like there's only 144 decks with this commander, and I feel like it is an interesting commander to build around. If anybody's interested, I might take a crack at it, see what I can come up with on it. 4 mana's definitely pretty steep for a 0/1, don't get me wrong. Um, but it's just the tap and deal damage thing. There's a lot of untapped things you could do with this, I know for sure. I mean, even just having like a Freed from the Real, Springleaf Drum, like that's just two cards off the top of my head that could utilize in this deck with this commander. And people are always looking for weird niche commanders, and I think this is one that if you rolled up to it, rolled up to a table with it, and this was your commander, people are like, "What the heck is that?" And then it's got some real weird stuff in it, and you do things that people don't expect. It's almost kind of a boomer slash hipster commander in that respect. Nobody's going to be expecting you to sit down with Reveka Wizard Savant at the table. So that's why I picked this card. It's not really a good card, so to speak, but it's interesting, it's different, and that's why I wanted to point it out in case maybe it gets more people interested in looking at it. And our next card here is Dry Spell. It's 1 generic, 1 black for sorcery. It says Dry Spell deals 1 damage to each creature and player. Valgavoth, the red-black one from Duskmourn, is super hot right now. This card would go excellent in that deck because it does 1 damage to each player. So you're going to get all those triggers off of him. This would also go really, really well in Ob Nixilis, who cares about exactly 1 damage to each player. So you could play this in Ob Nixilis, get 4 counters on him right off the bat, exile 4 cards. I mean, this thing is MVP in that deck, I feel like. So definitely keep an eye out for this card. It's sorcery speed, but whatever. You're mostly going to be playing cards like that on your own turn anyways. You're not going to be like instant speeding 1 damage just to get a trigger. But again, underrated card. I think it goes good in either of those decks. Even Judith Scourge Diva to an extent because of her Death Touchy lifelink kind of thing. If you were to play this and deal 1 damage to each creature, all those creatures are going to die because of her Death Touch ability. So really good in that deck as well. And finally, our last card here is Primal Order. It's 2 generic, 2 green for an enchantment, and it says during each player's upkeep, Primal Order deals 1 damage to that player for each non-basic land he or she controls. Again, with the ubiquitousness of non-basic lands in the format, this thing could be a powerhouse. If you have somebody in your playgroup or at your LGS that just like does not run basic lands, they're going to regret it the moment you drop this thing down. I mean, for 4 mana, it's pretty solid because they could be taking up to 4 or 5 damage a turn during their upkeep. And it is for each player, count yourself. So you have to think about running less non-basics, which is fine if you were to do this in like a mono green deck, like a Reki History of Kamigawa or something like that, where you're not really worried about having non-basic lands. This thing would be incredible in a deck like that. But if you have to run it in like a multicolor deck where you probably have to run a couple more non-basics just to mana fix and everything, it's going to do damage to you, but I feel like the trade-off for somebody who's a little bit more greedy in their mana bases, you would definitely hose them out. It's like a I don't want to say a blood moon, but dealing damage like that is pretty significant, especially if you're bolting somebody on their upkeep every single turn. It's going to sway players from playing non-basics on their turn. They might opt to play a basic instead if they have one. Now, obviously, if you're playing against a life gain deck and they're playing a bunch of non-basics, is probably going to negate that, but still, I thought it was a pretty interesting and underrated card, so that's why I put it on this list. So I couldn't really find like a bonus card. You guys know I usually like to do that, but Homelands, outside of the cards that everybody knows from the set, there really wasn't a whole lot. I couldn't even find one that I was like mildly interested in adding as a bonus card. So just those 5 cards, and even finding those 5 was a struggle. I think even Reveka is like kind of weird, and Prophecy is like it's okay. It could be good if you're, like I said, somebody who tutors a lot and they're going to be putting stuff on top of their deck, or like somebody who just brainstormed, something like that. So only 5 cards. And the next set we're going to be going into after this is Alliances. So keep an eye out for that, and keep an eye out for the next deck tag. That will not come out until the beginning of the year, just because I want to redo it, and also because I changed what it was after the recording failed. So yeah, that is 5 more cards that are underrated and or budget in EDH. Try them out in some decks. Let me know how they work out. Thank you all so much for checking this out, and we'll see you on the next one.